Today we will be going over creation, the beginning of the Elder Scrolls universe, the part in which all things became manifest, and where the races of Nirn have come from in some way. This will be going over more than just what goes on in the games. This is what happens before, way before, in the Merithic era, and before then even. This is a longer talk about the creation myth. Multiple races have multiple different beliefs as into what happened that day or those days. Lorcan is seen as such a different figure in so many different texts and these books written in these games tonight, and within the last long time of playing these games. I've researched and looked into the lore myself. I've watched the videos that many of you have as well. And I would like to now sit down and talk to you about the creation myth. In the beginning of time, there were only two beings, and their names were Anu and Padome. And this comes from the annotated Anuwad. This book can be found in a variety of locations in Morrowind, Oblivion, and in Skyrim, as well as, I'm pretty sure, in Elder Scrolls Online. This book is a fantastic opening to the beginning of the universe. Something that very few, if any, can actually talk about in the universe itself. And today I would like to transport us into that universe in some way and talk about it as if it was real, and speak from it as a person who really loves and appreciates the lore in these video games. It is something of a dichotomy written into every single character, especially the god Lorcan. So take your minds and let's journey into the void with Anu and Padome and watch as time begins. While Anu and Padome are in the void, there is nothing and everything. It is the beginning, it is the creation, and there is everything there to conceive, but nothing else. And Anu being more of a peaceful entity, whereas Padome is the embodiment of chaos and destruction. They are both brothers, and the issue starts when they create Nur. Nur being an embodiment of both of them in some way. The issue is that Anu loved Nur, and Nur loved Anu, and Padome was left unloved and decided to retreat in bitterness. Anu and Nur became close. Nur became pregnant, but however, before giving birth, Padome returned and told Nur of his love for her. Nur told him that she only loved Anu, and Padome beat her in rage, and Nur gave birth to creation. She died, however, due to her injuries. Life then sprang up on 12 different worlds, and it flourished and grew. There were no stars at this point. Padome was able to return to time, and he saw creation. He hated it. He felt a rage for it. He felt betrayed. After he saw this, he took a sword and cut through all these planets and started to destroy what Anu and Nur had created. And once Anu came back, they began to fight. The blood of Padome became the Daedra, and the blood of Anu became the stars. The mingled blood of both of them became the Aedra. This is why they have a capacity for both good and evil, and a greater affinity for earthly affairs than the Daedra, who have no connection to creation. On the world of Nirn, everything was chaotic, and the only survivors of any of this were the Elnufey and the Hist. The Elnufey are the ancestors to all men and Mer, and they have a deep-rooted tree that you could follow back to Elnufey. The Elnufey, when they came back to this planet, they fortified their borders immediately and tried to lock themselves away. They attempted to live on as they were before in this newfound world after crash landing here. The wandering Elnufey, who were not part of that crash and had not been there for the beginning of the creation of this new city, well, they found themselves amazed when they finally found the city of their kin. Amongst all of this, the wandering Elnufey expected that they would be welcomed back into their kin. They were not. They were seen as degenerates, fallen from their former glory. War immediately broke out and raged across the whole of Nirn. The Wanderers were more numerous, and they were toughened by their long struggle to survive on Nirn. The war had reshaped the face of Nirn, sinking much of the land beneath the oceans, for before this, it was mostly just land. Small seas separating the boundaries. This is where the continents had broken off. Over many years, the Elnufey of Tamriel became the Mer, the Dwemer, the Deep Ones, the Dwarves, the Chimer, the Changed Ones, who later became the Dunmer, and the Dunmer, the Dark or Cursed Ones, or Dark Elves, the Bosmer, the Green, or the Forest Ones, the Wood Elves, the Altmer, the Elder or High Ones, the High Elves, are now separated by continents. The wandering Elnufey, who had begun fighting with the old Elnufey, had retreated, and they became the Men, the Nords of Almora, the Redguards of Yakuta, and the Taseki of Akavir. The Hist, however, stood idly by, did not engage in the conflict. However, most of their realm was destroyed as the war passed over it, and a small corner of it survived, however, to become Blackmarsh and Tamriel. Some of this story of the annotated Annuad is literal, and some of it is not. And it's very difficult to distinguish upon which is fact and which is fiction. However, I believe that there is a mix of both, and you will see more as we go into a study of the monomyth. The monomyth itself is a fantastic book found in many, many areas within all of the games. The monomyth is a theological book containing the common creation myths. This book sheds light on some of the more interesting parts of the story that you would not know or would not interpret in the same way as many of these races do. It's not only is this story written, the annotated Annuad, written by one man, the monomyth is a composition of both human and elven lore, and it's written in a way to be understood by all races. And the issue, however, that is very, very clear is that humans and Aldemari very different worldview on the divine. After all of this had happened and Padume had destroyed and then it was reformed into one planet, Lorkhan was born, him and all of his other siblings. Lorkhan is said to have been born in the darkness in the Khajiit myth. The Khajiit believe Lorkja was born in the darkness to hide away from the equivalent to Padume. The dichotomy between Lorkhan is apparent very quickly when you start to think about him as the trickster god. The world in which we take place in is the heart of Lorkhan, his own creation. Lorkhan is the world. He's more than just a god. He is the reason for existence on this planet, at least. The heart of Lorkhan was made to serve Nirn, as Nirn is to serve the heart of Lorkhan. They are interlinked. Simply put, as the monomyth states, The schism in the human and Aldemari worldview is the mortal relationship to the divine. Humans take the humble path that they were created by the immortal forces, while the Altmer claim descendant from them. It does not seem like much, but it is a distinction that colors the rest of their diverging mythologies. It goes further on to state that all Tamrielic religions begin the same. Man or Mer, things between the dualism of Anu and his other. The twin forces go by the names of Anu Padme and Enel Sithis. Ek-Iel, Sitakiel, is not, Enel, the everlasting and fallible light, Sithis, the corrupting, inexpressible action in the middle of the gray maybe. In most cultures, Anuel is honored for his part in the interplay that creates the world, but Sithis is held in highest esteem because he is the one that causes the reaction. Sithis is thus the original creator, the entity who intrinsically causes change without design. Even the Hist acknowledge his being, and this is why the Dark Brotherhood is so akin to him. He changed things. Sithis created more with his destruction than Anu had. He formed a new coalescing being, one planet, not 12. We will be going into a couple of the chapters within this book, and we will also be referencing it with the annotated Anuwad as more of a book study in a way. But the Dragon God and the Missing God is the first chapter in this book, the Monomyth. As we've already talked about this book, I feel it is important to go through it a bit to understand the story. The Monomyth is a retelling of these events that was read in the annotated Anuwad, but it is told in a more vibrant, more vicious, and more clear understanding of what is going on the planet itself. The annotated Anuwad took most of its location within the Grey Maybe. The Elnafay landed upon Nern. However, we have yet to have explored what really was going on during this cataclysmic time of creation. And now it is time to go into that and speak about what was really going on. The Dragon God and the Missing God starts this. The Dragon God is always related to time, with Akatosh, Alkosh, even with Alduin, the World Eater, who is set to restore time to the beginning once he consumes it. The first god is often called Akatosh, and to quote it, it says, "To perch from eternity allowed the day." He is the central god in the Cyrodiilic Empire. The Missing God is Lorkhan, and we will go into this character really quickly here in just a moment. But let's go forward within the book. Note that Tamriel and the mortal plane do not exist yet. The Grey Maybe is still the playground of the original spirits. Some are more bound to Anu's light, others to the unknowable void. Their constant flux and interplay increase their numbers, and their personalities take long to congeal. At this point, we are still dealing with the Grey Maybe. We are still watching as the world becomes one. The strongest and most recognizable spirits at this point, the beings within the pantheon at this time, are Mephala, Arkay, Ymir, Magnus, and Rapuka, who I will continue from this point to call Tal Papa. Tal Papa being the head of the religion in Akavir. At this point, they plan to create Mundus, the mortal plane. Humans, with the exception of Red Guards, at this point see it as divine mercy and enlightenment, whereby lesser creatures can eventually reach godhood. Altmer, however, see this as a cruel deception, a trick that sundered their connection to the spirit plane. This is where things get off rails quite quickly. The Altmer believe in a whole different set of values than the humanity part of it, and it is due to how this was handled. We will now be reading from the Lorcan chapter within the Monomyth. I will read this in its entirety, for it is important to understand who Lorcan is. Lorcan, this creator, trickster, tester, deity, is in every Tamrielic myth tradition. He is the most popular name in the Aldameri, Lorcan, or Doom Drum. He even conceived or contrived the original spirits to bring about the creation of the mortal plane, upsetting the status quo, much like his father Padome had introduced instability into the universe in the being place. After the world is materialized, Lorcan is separated from his divine center, sometimes involuntarily, and wonders the creation of the Et Ada. Interpretations of these events differ widely on culture, and below are some of the better known, such as Yakuta, Sata, the world skin, which is a very, very long passage about the creation of Nirn, and how it is a ball of skin from the serpent. The Yakutans believe Sakata was the first serpent, a snake who came before, and all the worlds to come rested in the glimmer of its scale. This serpent was so massive that it controlled and took up the entire boundary of the universe. Its scales were massive, its body humongous, and there was no room for creation to flourish, no land for growth, nothing to be more than what it was. And thus he was cursed. Akatel, who cursed the serpent with hungry stomach, caused the serpent to consume itself over time, essentially creating a loop of consuming itself and then reforming. The reformation was only a torture for Sakatel because it required him to continue to eat. He could not stop consuming. The hunger was too much, and even as he bit into his own heart, the hunger refused to stop. Not only did this happen once, but it continued repetitively every single time the universe was recreated. Sakatel ate itself over and over. The strongest spirits learned to bypass the cycle of restoration in the universe, where it continued to restore itself to the beginning state. They learned how to go into the next universe, and the way they did this was by using a process called the walkabout, a way of striding between world skins. Ta Papa was so big that he was able to place the stars in the sky so that the weaker spirits may find a way out into the far shores, a place where the beings of highest repute would stay. This is where Ta Papa received his name, Ta Papa, because before he was Reputa. At this point, he decided to sire multiple children. The beginning of the issues started here. At this point, a second serpent had appeared, Sep. Sep had much of the hungry stomach still within him, and sometime and multiple hungers from multiple skins had overlapped on top of them. He was so hungry he could not think straight. Sometimes he would just eat the spirits he was supposed to help, but Ta Papa would always reach in and take them back out. Finally, tired of helping Ta Papa, Sep went out and gathered the rest of the old skins, balled them up, and then he convinced all the other spirits that he can to come to this world. As many spirits came, Ta Papa became saddened. He knew it was a trick. Pretty soon, the spirits on the world ball started to die, and very far from the real world of Sakatal, they found that it was too far to continue to jump into the stars. spirits were left there, and they tried to plead with Tall Papa to take them back, but he refused. He could not, and it was too far for him to reach. He gave them one last gift, out of his kindness of his heart, the ability to have children. He told the spirits that they must learn new ways to follow the stars to the far shores now. If they could not, then they must live on through their children, which was not the same as before. Sep, however, needed more punishment, so Tall Papa squashed the snake with the big stick, and the hunger fell out of Sep's dead mouth, the only thing left of the second serpent. Now, in Cyrodiilic tradition, they believe a quite romanticized story of who he is, who Lorcan is. In the story there, Lorcan is characterized. In the Gyakuten story, Sakatal is referenced, but he is an embodiment of Padume. The second serpent is a characterization of Lorcan. Cyrodiilic tradition, however, dictates a bit more flamboyant nature, a bit more of a gravitas to the story, and thus it is named Shazar's Song. While we'll read the first paragraph, this was a new thing that Shazar described to the gods: becoming mothers and fathers, being responsible, and making great sacrifices with no guarantee of success, but Shazar spoke beautifully to them, and moved them beyond mystery and tears. Thus, the Aedra gave free birth to the world, the beasts and the beings, making these things from parts of yourselves. This free birth was very painful. Afterwards, the Aedra were no longer young and strong and powerful, as they had been from the beginning of days. Some of the Aedra were disappointed and bitter in their loss, and angry with Shazar, and with all creation, for they felt Shazar had lied and tricked them. These Aedra, the gods of the Aldmer, led by Ariel, were disgusted with their enfeebled selves, and by what they had created. Everything is spoiled for now, and for all of time. The most we can do is teach the elven races to suffer nobly, with dignity, and chastise ourselves for our folly, and avenge ourselves upon Shazar and his allies. Now you see, this is another interpretation of Lorcan, the betrayer, the trickster, the person who created the world through his deceit. Other Aedra looked upon creation, and they were pleased. These Aedra, the gods of men and beast folk, led by Akatosh, praised and cherished their ward. The mortal races, we have suffered, we are diminished for a time. But the mortal world we have is made glorious, filling our hearts with spirits and hope. Let us teach the mortal races to live well, to cherish beauty and honor, and to love one another as we love them. Thus are the gods of men tender and patient, and thus the men and beast folk great in heart for joy or suffering, and ambitious for greater wisdom and a better world. Now, when the Daedra Lord heard Shazar, they mocked him, and the other Aedra, cut part of yourselves off and lose them forever? Forever. That's stupid. You will be sorry. We are far smarter than you, for we will create a new world out of ourselves. But we will not cut it off, or let it mock us. But we will make this world within ourselves, forever ours, and under our complete control. This is where the creation of oblivion comes in. The lesser Daedra are created by the Daedric lords within themselves. They have decided to turn away from Mundus. They felt betrayed by not only Lorcan, or Shazar, or whatever name you choose to pick. They also felt disgusted at the fact that they would have to give up their own power to have children, to have a mortal race. It seemed almost useless when they could just create. They did not need to give up. They did not need to empower a race. They could just have what they wanted. For the most part, the Daedric Lords were content with this decision to leave the plane of mortality. They always had worshippers and servants and other things close at hand, but at the same time, they sometimes looked upon envy upon the mortal realms. For though mortals were foul and feeble and contemptible, their passions and ambitions were also far more surprising and entertaining than the antics of lesser Daedra. Not only are you fools to mutilate yourselves, gloat the Daedra Lords, but you can't even keep the best pieces, which prefer the glory and power of the Daedric Lords to the feeble vulgarity, mush-minded Aedra. At this point, Nirn has been created and Oblivion has separated off. This is where Lorkhan has become the deceiver. He has had to flee. Here is the ultimary heart of the world. Anu encompassed all things. So that he might know himself, he created Anuel, his soul, and the soul of all things. Anuel, as all souls, was given to self-reflection, and for this he needed to differentiate between his forms, attributes, and intellects. Thus was born Sithis. At first, the Arborist was turbulent and confusing, as Anuel's ruminations went on without design. Aspects of the Arborist then asked for a schedule to flow or procedures whereby they might enjoy themselves a little longer outside of the perfect knowledge. So, that he might know himself this way too, Anu created Ariel, and the soul of his soul. Ariel bled through the Arborist as a new force called time. With time, various aspects of the Arborist began to understand their natures and limitations. They took names like Magnus, or Mara, or Zin. One of these, Lorkhan, was more of a limit than a nature, so that he could never last long anywhere. As he entered every aspect of Aniel, Lorkhan would plant the idea that he was almost wholly based on limitation. He outlined a plan to create a soul for the Arborist, a place where the aspects of aspects might be allowed self-reflect. He gained many followers, even Ariel. When told he would become the king of this new world, he agreed to help Lorkhan. So, they created the Mundus, where their own aspects might live, and became the Et Ada. But this was a trick. As Lorkhan knew, the world contained more limitations than not, and was therefore hardly a thing of Anu at all. Mundus was the house of Sithis. As their aspects began to die off, many of the Et Ada vanished completely. Some escaped, like Magnus, and this is why there are no limitations to magic. Magnus's escape was so large that once he left, he punctured a hole so large, and that is what we call the sun. Others, like Ymir, transformed themselves into Elnofek, the earth bones, so that the world might not die. Some had to marry and make children just to the last. Each generation was weaker than the last, and soon they were the Altmer. Darkness caved in. Lorkhan made armies out of the weakest souls and named them men, and then brought Sithis into every quarter. Ariel pleaded with Anu to take them back, but he had already filled their places with something else. But his soul was gentler, so he granted Ariel his bow and shield, so that he might save the Aldmeri forces from the hordes of men. Some had already fallen, like the Chimer, who listened to the tainted Edda Ada, and others, like the Bosmer, had soiled time's line by taking mannish wives. Ariel could not save Admora, the Elder Wood, and it was lost to men. They were chased south to the east of Old El Nefeh, and Lorkhan was close behind. He shattered the land into many. Finally, Trinimac, Ariel's greatest knight, knocked Lorkhan down in front of his army, reached in with more than hands to take his heart. He was undone. The men dragged Lorkhan's body away and swore vengeance on the heirs of Ariel for all of time. But when Trinimac and Ariel tried to destroy the heart of Lorkhan, it laughed at them. It said, "This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other." So Ariel fastened the heart to an arrow and let it fly into the sea, where no aspect of the new world may ever find it. And this is where we find the heart of Lorkhan. Later, it is regrown into the giant volcanic mainland of Vardenfell, and that is why it is off the coast. It is harboring the heart of Lorkhan, its rage bubbling as a volcanic expression. This story told by the Aldmeri, there is a similar path we can follow. After reading over this, we understand a few things. At first, there were two beings, and they created another being. This being loved one of the first, but the other became bitter and cut creation in half. That is always the beginning. However, the next part of the story is dealing with the kids, the children of those beings. Those beings, children, are the reason for Nirn. Nirn was created by multiple beings, from what we understand, but is it multiple beings' choice to create it, or was it Lorkhan's deception that created it? That much is not known. It is just as believable that Lorkhan had deceived other beings to come to this planet to create it with him and then entrapped them and stuck them there. But it is just as possible that this was the right way. This was the right thing to do. That this was what was needed to be done. It may have been a sacrifice of others and himself, but it may have been a sacrifice that was required. Or it may have been an acknowledged thing from most of the beings who came that they would be stuck there, whereas a few of them grew hostile. This story shines a weird light upon the Aedra who are violent towards Lorkhan. It could be that either the Aedra have spun a story about their success over a bad individual, and that is why you're all locked here. Or it could be that Lorkhan had deceived you and all of your ancestors. That part is unknown. However, the forces that had come up against him, the story ends the same way, no matter what it is that Lorkhan's heart was eventually ripped from him and shot into the planet, where it grew into Red Mountain. The belief that Tall Papa understood what was going on when Sep, the second serpent, created the skin ball. The relationship between him understanding it was a deception is mirrored almost identically in the Aldmeri Heart of the World. Ariel pleaded with Anu to take them back, but he had already filled their places with something else, and then gave them the bow and shield. Is the bow the only gift given? Well, no. The gift was also the ability to have children. That was the other gift. Essentially, this part of the timeline where we are closing in on the death of Lorkhan is one where the gods above the gods gave down the gift of childbearing and of weaponry to take over their land, but in the process had to leave them behind to either find their own way or pass on their information through the generations and hopefully reach godhood once more. All of these mythoses combined are very important to understand if you want to really look at what was going on at the beginning of time. There is another book, however, we have yet to have gone over, and this is the Khajiit myth, but it is just as important, if not even more important, in shedding more light. This is the Khajiit mythos. This is the book, Words of Clan Mother Ahanis. Ahanis tells you are no longer a meowing kitten. You have learned to keep secrets from Anis. So Anis tells you, in the beginning, there were two litter mates, Anur and Fatumai. After many phases, Fatumai said to Anur, "Let us wed and make children to share happiness." They gave birth to Alkosh, the first cat. Said Anur, "Alkosh, we give you time for what is as fast or as slow as a cat." Then they gave birth to Kinnarai, the winds. Kinnarai, to you we give the sky. For what can fly higher than the wind? They gave birth to Margus, the cat's eye. Margus, we give you the sun. For what is brighter than the eye of a cat? They gave birth to Mara, the mother cat. Mara, you are love. For what is more loving than a mother? They gave birth to Stendar, the rut. Stendar, we give you mercy. For how does a rut survive except by mercy? And many phases passed, and Anur and Fatumai were happy. And Ahur said, "We should have more children to share our happiness." And Fatumai agreed. And she gave birth to Hermea, Hircine, Meraz, Mephala, Sagran, and Sheagorath. Herma, you are the tides. For who can say whether the moons predict the tides or the tides predict the moons? Hircine, you are the hungry cat. For what hunts better than the cat with an empty belly? Meraz, you are the Jakajit. For what is more destructive than a kitten? Mephala, you are the clan mother. For what is more secretive than the ways of the clan mothers? Saglin, you are the blood cat. For who can control the urges of blood? And Sheagorath, you are the skooma cat. For what is crazier than a cat on skooma? And Ahur said, 2 litters is enough, for too many children will steal our happiness. Fatumai, mother, Kedareth grows lonely, so high above the world, where not even my brother Alkosh can fly. Fatumai took pity on her and tricked her to make her pregnant again. And Fatumai gave birth to the moons and the motions. She gave birth to Nerni, the majestic sands and lush forests. And she gave birth to Azura, the dusk and dawn. And from the beginning, Nerni and Azura fought for their mother's favor. Ahur caught Fatimai while she was birthing. He was angry. Ahur struck Fatimai, and she fled to birth the last of her litter far away in the great darkness. Fatimai's children heard what had happened, and they all came to be with her and protect her from Ahur's anger. And Fatimai gave birth to Lorja, the last of her litter, in the great darkness. And the heart of Lorkhan was filled with the great darkness, and he was born. The great darkness knew his name, and Fatimai knew her time was near. She says, Ja Kajay, to you, Fatimai leaves the lattice. For what is steadier than the phases of the moon? Your eternal motions will protect us from Ahur's anger. And the moons left to take their place in the heavens, and Ahur growled and shook the great forest, but he could not cross the lattice. And Fatimai said, Nerni, to you Fatimai leaves her greatest gifts. You will give birth to many people, as Fatimai gave birth today. When Nerni saw that Azura had nothing, Nerni left smiling. And all Fatimai's children left except Azura, and Fatimai said, to you, my favorite daughter, Fatimai leaves her greatest gift. To you, Fatimai leaves her secrets. And Fatimai told her favorite daughter 3 things. When Nern is filled with her children, take one of them and change them. Make them the fastest, cleverest, most beautiful people, and call them Khajiit. Secondly, the Khajiit must be the best climbers. If Masser and Secunda fall, they must climb Kinneret's breath to set the moons back in their courses. 3. The Khajiit must be the best deceivers. They must always hide from the children of Ahur. 4. The Khajiit must be the best survivors. For Nerni will be jealous, and she will make the sands harsh, and the forest unforgiving, and the Khajiit will always be hungry and at war with Nerni. And with these words, Fatimai died. This story, this first part of the story, directly mirrors the exact story told between Anu and Padme, and once again is replicated by the story of Lorkhan and the story of Heart of the World by the Aldemari. This is a repetitious story, and while the changes in the story themselves are minute or focused on one race being better than the other, the truth still remains that there were 2, which came a third, which began war. Lord Khaja is said to have been filled with the Great Darkness, which is another way of indicating that he is corrupt. Later on, it is said, Lorja makes a place for children, and Lorja puts you there so you can give birth. But the heart of Lorkhan was filled with great darkness, and Lorkhan tricked his sibling, so they are forced into this new place with Nerni. And so many of Fatimai's children escaped and became the stars. And many of Fatimai's children died to make Nerni's path stable. And the survivors stayed and punished Lorja. The children of Fatimai tore the heart of Lorja and hid it deep within Nerni. They said, "We curse you, noisy Lorja, to walk Nerni for many phases." But Nerni soon forgave Lorja, for Nerni could make children. So she filled herself with children, but cried because her favorite children, the forest people, did not know their shape And this is the beginning of the myth of the creation of Khajiit. Whereas Azura took those secrets told from her, from Fatimai, and created the Khajiit race. And once the Khajiit race was created, Ymir told the secrets from Azura to Nerni. And Nerni made the forest wet and filled with poisons, and made the deserts hot and the sands biting. And Ymir named her race the Bosmer, and they will no longer be the same litter as the Khajiit. But Azura, in her wisdom, closed the ears of angry Ahur and the noisy Lorkjab, so they alone did not hear the word. To wrap this up, the story is one of betrayal, and it is one of sacrifice. Was the sacrifice one of greed, or was it one of creation? I think a bit of both. Was Lorkhan correct in what he did? Thank you everyone for watching this video. This has been a lore video from the SpyPie Gaming TV channel. If you would like to see more of this content, please leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel, as well as follow us on all our other social media platforms. I appreciate you all for watching this video. I know it's been a bit of a longer one. If you've made it this far, I'm extremely grateful. If you have any of your own creation myths or what you believe really would have gone down in this setting, please share them down below. You know, these stories are open for interpretation. Anyway, I would like to just say once again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next episode.